Bueno, chicos, vamos a ver cuáles son los mejores ejercicios de pecho según la ciencia. ¿Por quién? Por Jeff Nippard.
Best and worst chest exercises for muscle growth? Well, what are the best and worst chest exercises for muscle growth? Well, for a chest movement to rank highly, it needs to tick 3 boxes. 1, a big stretch with high tension. If it doesn't offer high tension in a deep stretch, I'm putting it in F tier, no exceptions. 2, it needs to feel good. It shouldn't cause pain, and it should have a smooth resistance profile, giving a good pump and a nice mind-muscle connection would be nice too. 3, it needs to have a simple progression. If you can't progressively overload by adding weight or reps, that's not good. And after ranking 20 of the most popular movements from S for super to F for fail, at the end, I'll crown one exercise as the best of the chest, raising it to S tier plus, and one as the most inept for the pecs, sending it to F tier hell. All right, let's get the worst out of the way. The hex press. I'm not a big fan of these. First, you never get a big stretch in your pecs because your arms never stretch out. They stay tucked in the whole time. And they don't offer maximum tension because your triceps will take
boludo, ahí, así. Podés estar 2 horas, boludo. No tiene tensiones.
Take over. There's no evidence that these target the inner pecs. In fact, I think they'd probably be worse for the inner pecs than a standard dumbbell press since the inner pec fibers aren't getting as stretched here. The hex press is going in F tier. The plate press is basically a hex press that feels even more awkward with even less overload potential, so it's also going in F tier. The dumbbell pullover is a tricky one. Biomechanics tells us that the pecs do help perform this movement alongside the lats and triceps. And when you look at the activation data, the pecs do activate on pullovers. The problem is, I simply don't feel my pecs when I do this movement whatsoever, and more or less every client I've ever worked with says the same. And I don't
Ese no me gusta el pullover, ni tampoco hacerlo para espalda, boludo, en polea. Porque, no sé, como que hay que agarrar bien la técnica, hay que hablarle bien la técnica como para sacarle partido. Y es un ejercicio, los dos estos ejercicios se ven demasiado.
See many top bodybuilders putting these on their chest day. So despite some theoretical merit, I think pullovers are a much better lat exercise than a pec exercise, and for that reason, I'm gonna put them in D tier. All right, let's look at some better exercises.
Claro, es mejor para espalda que para pecho. Y sí, porque vas a tirar más con la espalda. Pero yo no lo veo como óptimo. Para espalda yo no lo veo óptimo.
Exercises. The bench press. My ranking might surprise you here. It offers high tension on the pecs as long as you bring the bar all the way down to your chest. It's very easy to overload, and you can always add some weight over time as you get stronger.
Bueno, es un clásico. Yo preferiría más inclinado. El declinado es una verga, pero inclinado para la parte alta, la parte de la clavícula, para que trabaje una banda, boludo.
It feels good to me, although many people do complain that the bench press makes their shoulders feel a little cranky. I suspect that's because they're trying to lift more weight than they should be lifting, but I still hear the issue commonly enough that I do count it as a slight negative. So if it were just me, I think I'd probably put the bench press in S tier. I credit most of my own pec development to this exercise. However, it is...
Es muy bueno, muy buenísimo. En realidad es un clásico. Es lo mismo con la sentadilla, boludo. ¿Cómo no va a hacer sentadilla para pierna?
It's true that the barbell won't allow the pecs to get in quite as deep of a stretch as dumbbells do, since it'll come up solid against your rib cage.
Pero entre las variables yo prefiero hacerlo en inclinado. No sé por qué. Pero yo prefiero, a mí me gusta más inclinado.
And based on my coaching experience, not everyone gets as much pec activation out of the bench press as I do. So for that reason, I'm going to hesitantly drop it back to A tier. The incline bench press has all the same upsides as the flat bench press, except it slightly emphasizes the upper pecs. Now, a lot of people think this means it isn't as good for the mid and lower pecs as the flat bench. However, a recent study found that the incline bench press caused the same lower and mid pec growth as the flat bench did, plus better upper pec growth. So it's very close to S tier, but I think I'm going to leave it in A tier as well. The decline bench press doesn't have any long-term research comparing pec.
Esa es una verga. El declinado es una verga. Pero viste, el inclinado es como que la parte de arriba, la parte del medio trabajan por igual. O sea, siempre con una buena técnica, siempre con sobrecarga progresiva, todo. Y a mí me va joya. Lo que sí hago después del press, pero lo hago en máquina. Entonces que básicamente se podría decir que es como un press de banca normal. Trabajando lo que yo trabajo en máquina, ¿no?
Growth like the incline and flat bench. However, biomechanics tells us that a decline angle should target the mid and lower pecs a bit more. However, it has two minor downsides. For one, in my experience, more people struggle with getting their upper pecs to grow than their mid to lower pecs, so if you're trying to shift the bias, I would shift it toward the upper pecs for most people. Second, the decline bench does have slightly less range of motion than both the flat and the incline press. So, out of the three angle options, I would say it's my least favorite. I know some people swear by it, and it clearly is an effective chest builder. It's very close to being in A tier, but I'm gonna put it in B tier. Alright, the flat dumbbell press. This offers a deeper stretch on the pecs than the barbell because the dumbbells can move.
Este también prefiero hacerlo inclinado en vez de normal, digamos.
Move freely past the rib cage. They feel great, you should get a great chest pump on these, and because people are.
Más allá que con mancuernas nunca vas a poder hacer el rango de recorrido. El recorrido completo, digo. ¿Por qué? Porque ves, mirá el disco, mirá hasta dónde le llega. Si tendría que bajar más, ponele, para que toque el pecho. Pero igual trabaja. Si vos lo tirás bien para abajo, así doblando un poquito los codos para el lado de adentro, ahí, y haciéndolo. Pasa que hay mucha gente en el gimnasio, que lo veo, que se cargan un peso de la concha de la lora y hacen así. De ahí, y ahí suben. Y ahí suben. Hay que ser buena técnica, compañeros.
Less likely to let their ego take over on this exercise, it's less common for people to have shoulder issues. As a beginner and intermediate level lifter, you should be able to progressively overload this movement just fine by either adding reps or increasing the weight of the dumbbells. However, once you get decently strong, you may max out the dumbbell rack at your gym, which usually stops at 100 pounds. Also, once you get that strong, the dumbbells get so big and bulky that they can be quite awkward to handle. So while the flat dumbbell press is just about an S tier,
boludo, no sé por qué, bueno, a mí me pasa, no sé si a otro, pero al momento de hacer una repe, o sea, cuando estás tumbado acá, así con la mancuerna acá, para hacer la primera, no sé por qué esa cuesta como si fuera el fallo, boludo. Y las otras salen livianitas.
it's getting knocked down to A tier for those potential overloading issues in more advanced lifters. The incline dumbbell press is also going in A tier, since it's the same basic movement with the same upsides and downside, except again, it has slightly more emphasis on the upper pecs. And I'm putting the decline dumbbell press in B tier, since I do find it awkward to set up. You'll probably need someone to hand you the dumbbells, and again, lower pecs rarely need any extra emphasis. Okay, the machine chest press. A good chest press machine will give a nice deep stretch on the pecs and provide high tension throughout the range of motion. Unlike barbells and dumbbells, you're more locked in, which should help increase the mind-muscle connection with your pecs and give a massive pump. Machines are very easy to overload. You can always add some weight or a rep from week to week, and they have the advantage.
Ahí yo lo veo igual, como que se tendría que poner un pelín más arriba para que los codos no le generan acá. Porque capaz que, bueno, él sabe, pero alguien, qué sé yo, uno que ve un pelo brócoli, se pone a hacer eso. No, porque yo ni hace así y le carga peso y no sabe bien la técnica todavía. Entonces lo mejor es acá. O sea, de vez del codo para alineado con el hombro, más para abajo, más tipo en diagonal. Y de ahí bajar. Y de ahí subir.
Advantage of being a little
No
safer
sé,
to
son cosas. Capaz que cada uno lo puede probar o no, sí.
push to failure than free weights.
Pero
Assuming you have a good chest press machine that
sí, pero se nota que estirás una banda, boludo. Y es buenísimo.
ticks all those boxes, I really can't think of a downside from a muscle building standpoint. And so the machine chest press is our first exercise getting awarded to S tier. All right, dips. Let's see. Massive stretch on the pecs, possibly the best compound.
Este es bueno, depende cómo te pongas o depende de las personas. Hay muchas personas que sienten más el tríceps que el pecho. Y hay veces que le molesta mucho el hombro, boludo, a la gente. Entonces este ejercicio es bueno, pero a cada persona se le va a hacer diferente. O sea, a mí generalmente cuando yo hago fondo, me duele bastante el hombro.
Exercise I'm aware of for getting into a deep pec stretch. They offer high tension, and there's many ways to apply progressive overload. You can do assisted dips and reduce the assistant's weight over time, or you can do body weight dips and add reps, or you can slow down the negative a bit more from week to week. And then as you gain more strength, you can use a weight belt to add external load. The only downside of dips is that some people find that their shoulders get cranky if they do them too much, although I've never actually experienced that personally. But I will say, I don't think dips have the smoothest feel. So despite many upsides, they are taking a slight hit in the feels good department for me, and for that reason, I'm gonna put them in A tier instead of S tier. They're definitely an exercise worth including though. Okay, what about push-ups? Bodyweight push-ups are nice because you can do them anywhere without any equipment. However, assuming you do have gym access, I think there are far better options for chest growth. The problem is that
Claro. Eso es más para calistenia, más para gente que, qué sé yo, capaz que no tenés plata para ir al gimnasio y no tenés ningún parque cerca de calistenia, te podés poner a hacer tu casa. Ya sea así, ya sea, bueno, diamantes más para tríceps, pero con palmada en el muslo, es de todo. Pasa que al hacer una sobrecarga progresiva, ¿qué pasa? Va a llegar un punto que va a tener que hacer, no sé, 70 en una serie para sentir fatiga que vas al fallo y después otras 70 más, ¿viste? Y tardás como 3 horas, boludo, para trabajar el pecho.
that once you get decently strong, you'll need to do at least 30 plus reps to get close enough to failure to maximize muscle growth, which isn't ideal. I do think that's fine if you're doing them as a end of workout finisher, but otherwise doing all those reps can be exhausting for no added benefit. You'll also come up solid against the floor before your pecs are fully stretched.
Aparte de que, ponele, no sé, una persona, ponele que Nippard tenga 100 kilos, ¿no? Pese. Vamos a suponer. El chabón no está haciendo flexiones con 100 kilos. Porque se dice que posicionado así, lo que podés mover es el 60% del cuerpo tuyo, del peso de tu cuerpo. El 60%. No es que, peso 100 kilos, ya está haciendo una flexión de brazo, estoy cargando 100 kilos. No, es el 60%.
And they're not that easy to overload. While you can have a partner add some weight to your back, the weight always feels a bit unstable for me. They are a decent beginner exercise, but I'm still putting bodyweight push-ups in C tier. Banded push-ups do add some extra tension to the movement. However, almost all of that tension is added to the top half rather than the bottom half of the push-up. So tension still isn't being maximized while the pecs are stretched. I still think they're a decent finisher though, so I'll put them in B tier. Deficit push-ups fix the problem of not getting a deep stretch on the pecs, and even though they're still a bit tricky to overload, you can make the exercise more challenging by pausing for 2 to 3 seconds in the bottom. I think that if you're going to do push-ups, this is how you should do them. Deficit push-ups are going in A tier. I used to do a lot of plyometric push-ups in my early powerlifting days.
Aunque trabaja también un poquito el hombro, ¿no?
Is to build up explosive.
El hombro anterior también, al bajar tanto, ya no tenés contracción con el pectoral, entonces primero tenés que hacer fuerza con el hombro. Pero es bueno.
Chest power for the bench press, but I've fallen out of love with them since. They're just not great for maximizing tension on the negative or in the stretch, and even though there is some research supporting more explosive training, I'd rather use an explosive tempo on a weight-loaded exercise like the bench press if bodybuilding is the goal. I'm going to put these in D tier as a chest builder. Speaking of...
Sí. Bueno, pero yo lo veo como una buena variante para tener otro estímulo, digamos.
Less conventional exercises, the guillotine press is basically...
Siempre contando de que no tengas cosas, que no puedas ir al gimnasio o no tener un parque cerca o que no tenés mancuerna.
Basically a normal flat bench press, except you shrug your shoulders up, flare your elbows out, and lower the barbell down to your neck. A lot of people kick up a big fuss about this exercise causing shoulder issues, but there's no direct evidence or even strong rationale to support that. You can listen to Dr. Mike if you don't believe me.
Some people will bench press guillotine style, where they take a higher position on the chest and they let their elbows come up. They feel a huge stretch in the pecs. Their shoulders feel amazing. No problem. Correct answer. Other folks will touch a little bit below the nipple line, actually on their abdomen, and they will tuck their elbows on the way down. If that is what hits your pecs the most, and it makes your elbows and shoulders feel nice and comfy and safe, Beautiful, right answer. What I don't want you guys to get caught up in is people on the internet who say this is bad because biomechanics. I don't know where the fuck they say that, because if you go out here, notice my pecs are getting more stretched as I pull out.
That said, I do believe that for some people, especially those with pre-existing shoulder issues, flaring the elbows might hurt, so in that case, I just wouldn't bother with these. However, guillotine presses will stretch the pecs better than any of the other barbell presses
No sé, amigo.
we've discussed, and it also has a cool history in lifting culture. I am a fan, and I would put it in A tier. However, because it's potentially very dangerous, dropping the bar on your neck would be lights out, I'm gonna go ahead and put it in F tier.
Sí, boludo, me parecía muy arriesgado, boludo. Con 20 kilos de lado no pasa nada, pero el tema cuando le metes peso, o sea, la sobrecarga progresiva no le podés poner.
Don't think the potential hazard risk is worth any potential marginal gains you'll get from it. That said, if you modify the exercise to do the same basic movement with dumbbells, it suddenly becomes much safer, and in that case, I am gonna put these in A tier. Again, these may fall in D tier or F tier for those of you who get
Es como hacer una retracción escapular. Hacer así y ahí.
shoulder pain from it, but in my experience, the majority of lifters can flare their elbows without issue. Just start light and build up your tolerance. To round out the dumbbell press variations, I guess I'll cover the one-arm dumbbell press. I still see this quite a bit at the gym, but doing one arm at a time has no advantage because each pec has to work individually in a dumbbell press anyway. So doing them one arm at a time just makes it harder to keep your balance, which disperses tension away from the pecs. Maybe a bit harsh, but I'm gonna put these in F tier. The Smith machine gets a lot of hate for some reason, but studies consistently show that it is effective at building muscle across a variety of different exercises. I think it's a great alternative to the standard bench press with all the same upsides, plus I find I'm more confident pushing the Smith machine press closer to failure. These are going in A tier along with the other barbell presses. And the incline Smith machine press is the same basic movement, except with a little more upper pec emphasis, so.
Hay que decir que en la Smith, bueno, no sé si en esa, pero en Smith la barra pesa 11 kilos y no 20 como todos piensan, porque después te vienen con los pesos, te dicen, no, yo tengo, qué sé yo, 90 en banca. ¿En dónde la sé? No, en Smith. Entonces la barra más liviana que la olímpica, por así decirlo.
They're also going in A tier. Okay, so far we've been discussing only compound chest exercises. Presses, dips, and push-up variations that'll smash the pecs, but also target the front delts and triceps.
Y faltan el pec deck, el con polea, los cruzos con
Sometimes
polea.
you want to isolate the pecs, and for that,
Ese es buenísimo.
we've got a bunch of pec fly variations. There's cable crossovers, seated cable pec flies, the pec deck machine, and dumbbell flies. Let's start with cable crossovers. These do provide a big stretch on the pecs with nice, smooth, and even tension throughout the range of motion. They feel good to me and usually give me a solid chest
Y yo de ahí prefiero hacerlo, o sea, adelantado. O sea, tener las poleas atrás, no trabajar paralelamente, digamos.
pump. They're not quite as conducive to progressive overload as pressing movements, simply because you can't go as heavy, but you can still add a rep here and there and focus on technique, so that's not a deal breaker. The only downside to these is that by doing them standing, you may find that the cable pulls your body back, especially as you get stronger, which can make it less stable. You can correct for this by bending forward and flying downward, so while it's close to being perfect, it's not the most stable fly variation, and for that reason, I'm putting it in A tier. The seated pec fly has all the same upsides as the cable crossover, but by sitting down, you get rid of the balancing component and increase
Claro, boludo. Me resulta una paja tener que agarrar una polea, otra polea, caminar hasta ahí para recién hacerlo. Pero bueno, o sea, gastas energía, por así decirlo. Pero bueno, cuando te pones la mancuerna de 40 de lado, es lo mismo. Porque para levantarla, para apoyarte en las piernas y tirarla, ahí estás desgastando algo de energía. Pero no, este es muy bueno, boludo. Muy bueno.
the stability of the exercise, which will make sure that all the tension coming from the cables is being applied directly to the pecs. This is my
Aunque yo tengo el pec deck, que el pec deck es obviamente sin polea, pero bueno, se parece bastante y no, está muy bueno.
favorite chest isolation movement at the moment, and so I'm going to make it my second addition to S tier. The pec deck machine shares many of the same benefits as you're also seated, so it's nice and stable, and you'll be able to get a big stretch on your pecs with high tension. I just don't find it feels
estirás una banda, boludo.
Quite as good as the cables do. The machine locks you into a very specific movement path, whereas the cables allow your shoulder to move a bit more freely.
Bueno, depende. Depende. Si tiene para hacer posteriores en el pec deck, los agarres los podés poner más atrás y podés estirar todo lo que quieras. Obviamente que con cable pasa que tenés que enganchar justo que vayan bien las poleas, boludo. Porque hay una a veces, capaz que vos vas a las dos, depende cómo sea el gimnasio, ¿no? Pero vos vas con una, capaz que una está liviana y la otra, no sé qué carajo, se traba el cable. Entonces como que eso ya te desconecta totalmente, boludo.
This means you may not be able to find that perfect line of pull for your pecs specifically. This is a pretty subjective one, but I'm going to put the pec deck machine in A tier. All right, the dumbbell fly. Now, a couple years ago, I probably
Es malísimo, boludo.
would have put this
Mirá, ahí, donde supuestamente tiene que haber más tensión en el pectoral. Porque vos si lo tocas ahora, tac, lo sentís que está en contracción, por así decirlo. Y ahí con los mancuernas, ¿qué tenés? Las mancuernas las tenés ahí y listo, se están cagando de risa. Obviamente cuando bajás sentís que se estira, pero al ponerle peso, qué sé yo, 10 kilos por lado, bueno, 12 kilos por lado, bueno, 15 por lado, bueno, le pones 20 calado, va a tener que doblar el codo. Y ahí ya cagaste la técnica, todo.
one in C tier because you get literally zero tension at the top of the range of motion when the pecs are most contracted. However, recent evidence has shown that the contraction is most likely not as important as the stretch is for muscle growth, and so I've opened the dumbbell fly back up as a viable option. I like to do these all as lengthened partials, so I just cut out the top half of the movement altogether where there's no tension anyway. But I still don't think they're quite as smooth as cable flies, and so they're losing 1 point.
Pero prefiero hacerlo en polea o en el pec deck, boludo. Si bien nunca, bueno, en mi gimnasio nunca hay libre 2 poleas juntas, justo, y menos banco, boludo, porque tenemos 4 bancos y se llena de gente y olvidate.
Point in the feels good department. I'm putting dumbbell flies in A tier. Okay, let's finish off with 3 less common exercises. One that I hate, one that I love, and one that's just okay. The cable press around is probably the only exercise we've covered so far that gets the pec fully contracted. That's because the press around is a rare exercise where you press the cable across your midline. So I do like to include it periodically for this reason, because even though the stretch literature is convincing to me, I still think including some short-length biased work isn't a bad idea until we get more evidence. Some people do find the movement to be a bit awkward at first, but once you get the hang of it, it really is a great option. I love the press around, and it's going in A tier. The crossbody standing dumbbell fly is another exercise where you extend your arm across your body to get the upper pecs fully contracted. But unlike the cable press around, the dumbbell offers literally zero tension when the pec is stretched. This is also basically a front raise, meaning the front delts will steal a lot of the tension from the pecs, even if you squeeze them at the top. Doing dumbbell flies lying down makes a lot more sense biomechanically, and so these are going in F tier. The floor press is mainly used for developing maximum bench press strength, and it's an exercise that I include in a lot of my strength and power building programs, as I think it's great for smashing the triceps and improving lockout strength. That said, the limited range of motion makes it a less than ideal candidate for chest hypertrophy, as you never get the pecs fully stretched. So even though I do love it for strength, it's just okay for pec growth, and I'm gonna leave it in C tier. Now, if I had to crown just one exercise as the best of the best, I'd probably go with a machine chest press. This is a broad category, and some machines are certainly better than others, but if you can find one that feels good at your gym,
si vos te pones a pensar es como el press de banca, pero obviamente podés hacer más recorrido todavía. Porque mirá cómo estira, boludo. Estira una banda.
I definitely think it's worth including. It ticks all the regular boxes, and you can safely push it to failure. And if I had to pick one exercise as the worst of the worst, it'd probably be the plate press. This is just one of those exercises that influencers do to be different, but unfortunately, it comes with a ton of downsides and no real upside. Also, I just launched phase 2 of my pure bodybuilding program over on jeffnippard.com, so that's available.
Bueno, amiguins, ya se terminó esto. ¿Ustedes qué dicen? Para ustedes, ¿cuáles fueron los mejores ejercicio de pectoral que se vio en el video. O si tienen alguno ustedes que daba acá, no sé. Pero yo ya dije todo. Compañero, a mí me gusta trabajar el pectoral en la manera de inclinado y funcionarlo con el pec deck o con el cruce de poleas. Esas 4 variantes de la forma que vos quieras ponerle, ¿no? Yo creo que ya ahí estarás trabajando todo el pectoral. No sé, para mí, ¿eh? Así que no sé. Lo leo en comentarios, compañero.